Good day, everyone. Today, our group will be presenting on our topic, which is engineers attrition, specifically why junior and mid-level engineers are leaving, and what the descriptive and diagnostic analytics approach can tell HR about it. My name is Jeremy, and together with me today are my groupmates Yiling, Clement, Morgan, and Susanna. So over the next 12 to 13 minutes, we will walk through the problem, the data we want to collect, and 5 diagnostic tests we run on that data, and what it all points to for retention strategy. So on the first slide, we can see the problem. So basically, what is actually happening on the ground is that we are seeing high voluntary turnover among engineers with 2 to 6 years experience. The departure cluster is around 18 to 30 months. This is the typical tenure before juniors or mid-level engineers resign. So that is a narrow window. It means engineers are leaving right around the point where a firm should be seeing a return on investment made in training and also onboarding them. Most of them aren't just leaving the profession. They are moving to competing consultancy or to client organization. And when we look at the reasons cited, it is a familiar list. So it's basically on their salary, unclear promotion timeline, and also inflexible work arrangement. But the real cause isn't just resignation itself. When an engineer leaves mid-project, it disrupts the delivery, adds supervisory loads to seniors, and also erodes client and project knowledge. So moving on. We have identified the 4 groups that will feel the impact when an engineer leaves. So this isn't just a HR problem, it ripples outward to these 4 groups. So on HR and talent acquisition, it means that they will need to have higher recruitment and training costs. And then on the project directors, it means shortages and stuff, and also more project risks to manage. So on the client side, they will have disruption to service continuity. And then on the departing engineer themselves, it means that their career progression and also their project history that they build on will be lost. So as data analysts supporting the HR, our task was twofold. First, we define what descriptive data HR should actually be collecting. And secondly, the design diagnostic that goes beyond engineers that are leaving to explain why they are leaving. So the next one, I'll be moving on and passing the slides to my group member, Yili.
Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Yiling. So now let's move on to the next slide. So before HR can diagnose why engineer leave, it needs the right descriptive foundation. The 5 categories of data that together build the full picture. First, turnover and tenure records. For example, the hire dates, the exit dates, the job title, project history, which are segmented by the tenure, bands, and job level. Second, compensation and benchmarking, salary, bonus, and benefit against market rate. Please note that this one is rarely the sole cause on its own. Third, this is the strongest retention level that we found, which is the career progression and development. For example, the time in grade, certification, training hours, and mentoring. Fourth, the workload and engagement metrics. For example, the utilization, overtime, project counts, and pulse survey score. And the fifth one, which is the exit, interview, and sentiment data, which adds qualitative depth on top of all the numbers. Now move on to the next slide. Translating that into practice, this is what we want the HR information system to actually capture field by field. Demographic data, for example, the age, gender, residency, and qualification. The employment data, like the hire date, job level, discipline, and manager. The tenure and exit, for example, the length of service, exit type, and destination, where are they going? and compensation, including the base salary, bonus, and market percentile. On top of that, we will need to also collect the career and development data, for example, the last promotion, certification and mentoring, the workload and engagement, for example, the utilization, the overtime, pass and score. Lastly, the exit interview data, both the coded reason, free text, and comment. These few aren't arbitrary, they are drawn from variables validated in empirical turnover research. So we are building on evidence, not guesswork. Now we would like to hand over to Clement to continue the slide.
Thanks, Edie. My name is Clement. So now let's look at the next section, that is the diagnostic analysis. So once that all this data exists, so the HR shouldn't just look at each variable in isolation. The values actually come from combining all these 5 targeted diagnostic tests, and we're going to walk through each one of them, and then we will explain what it does, what kind of a practical example that we can give, and also why all these tests matter. Right? Okay, let's quickly look at the first test. That is. Let's look at the multi-factor regression on the pay versus progression. We're going to isolate the drives of the real attrition. So this brings together a market pay percentile, the time in grade and last promotion, right? Reporting manager, and also the exit type. So that we can look at which factor actually, by combining them, which factor actually drive the resignation, once all the other are held constant. So here's what we reveal. An engineer whose time in grade exit 36 months without a promotion saw actually a 300% jump in likelihood to leave the company. That's 3 times higher, far outweighing the marginal effect of simply being paid 40% below the 40th percentile in the market. So why this matters is it actually stops HR from making the assumption and also the costly mistake of giving a blanket salary raise, while the actual cause is actually the broken promotion pathway, and also in some cases the lack of some managers' leadership style. Next, the test 2 is a hazard window survival analysis. So by using the higher date and also the exit date, the length of service, the job title, the business unit they belong to, and also the assigned mentor, we can actually build an employee survival curve from the historical data. And from that curve, we can expose the so-called hazard spike window, where in that window, the resignation probability actually jumped. So what we found in this study is that 80% of attrition spike actually happened between the 8th and also the 14th month. And from the time of the new hire joining the company. And if the person never received an assigned mentor within the first 30 days, that tells HR whether the early departure actually stems from an onboarding failure, onboarding problem, or actually the delayed development. And this can scale further into a real-time per employee risk score using a random forest and gradient boost model. Next, the third test is the threshold analysis on burnout rate. So by mapping the workload to sentiment. So we plot the billable utilization, the overtime, concurrent project, and also looking at the pulse survey score and also the exit type of the engineers we're talking about. So looking at this point, looking at the point where this, at which point the satisfaction actually collapses. So from there, we find a very clear pattern. Once an engineer carries 3 projects concurrently, and also the utilization exceeds 95% for 2 straight months, the resignation, the likelihood that the person will leave, will be predictably high in the next 60 days. And this lines up with the job embeddedness theory. And practically, it means that managers, they can actually catch overload early and rebalance the job assignment before their subordinate or an engineer decided to leave. Right? That's the 3 tests. And next, I will hand it over to my colleague Morgan, and he'll continue with the next 2. Okay.
Right. Thanks. All right. So I will continue with the next slide. This is test number 4. Looks at the demographic and the career interaction. It's cross-tabulating turnover by discipline, age bracket, and gender to surface cohort carrying disproportionate risk and drilling into their career development history. So what surfaced is that we found that female electrical engineer aged between 25 to 35 at the double department average with 45% longer time in grade and 60% less access to a mentor than male colleagues. So we cannot change demographic, but this analysis uncovers system bias, unequal access to development, and exclusionary subcultures that are pushing the specific talent out of the door. And that is something the firm can act on. Okay, so we move on to the next slide. So test number 5 triangulates qualitative and quantitative data, checking coded exit results and free text comment against training hours, education status, qualification, and where are we? Oh, and the greatest highest qualification demographic. Okay. All right. To see whether the people say in exit interviews matches what actually happened. So 60% of the exit interview cited lack of career growth as the top reason for leaving. So when we cross-check that against the development records, 85% of the engineers have logged on 0 training hours and leaving and received no certificate support that year. Self-supported exit data is often softened by social desirability bias. So this triangulation tells HR whether it is need to be fixed, need to fix the actual development program, or just communicate it better. Okay. All right. So put together these 5 tests from one integrated diagnosis. So regression identifies which factor are most strongly linked to turnover. Survival and risk model provides early warning and the employees at highest risk. And the threshold, demographic, and qualitative checks validate those statistical findings against real operational data and employees' feedback. This integrated approach is what moves HR from simply identifying that turnover is happening to understanding its causes, and from there to targeted evidence-based retention strategy. So next slide, I hand over to our next presenter, Susanna.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Morgan. And to bring it all together, descriptive data, which is the tenure, pay, career, workload, and exit reasons. These are the data that tells HR who is leaving and when. The 5 diagnostic tests tell HR why: stall promotion, onboarding gaps, burnout threshold, systemic inequality, or under-delivered development. And together, these evidence best let HR design retention intervention that are specific, cost-effective, and grounded both in theory and the firm's own data. And it's not a guesswork. That's our proposed approach for XYZ Engineering Consultant. Thank you, and we are happy to take all questions.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Cheese.
Easy.